London, 1815. Lord Langdon Ravenscroft, Duke of Thornfield, was not in the habit of frequenting libraries. The quiet solemnity of such places reminded him too much of his father's study, a chamber of stern lectures and disappointed sighs. Yet there he stood among the towering shelves of Lady Harrington's private collection, hiding from the suffocating press of society that swirled through the ballroom beyond. "You appear as though you've been sentenced to transportation, Your Grace," came a voice from behind a shelf of leather-bound volumes. "Is the punishment of literature so very severe?" Langdon turned to find a young woman perched atop a library ladder, a book balanced in one hand while the other held fast to the wooden frame. Her chestnut hair was swept into an elegant coiffure, though several rebellious curls had escaped their pins. "I find myself more transported by this sanctuary than sentenced to it, Miss Winifred Oakley," she replied, descending the ladder with surprising grace despite her voluminous silk gown. "Though my friends call me Winnie." "Are we to be friends then, Miss Oakley?" Langdon asked, eyebrow raised in amusement. "That depends entirely on your taste in literature, Your Grace." She gestured to the empty shelves where he stood. "You seem to be contemplating rather than reading." Langdon smiled wryly. "I confess I came here seeking refuge from Lady Harrington's matchmaking schemes. She has paraded no fewer than 5 eligible young ladies before me this evening." "Ah," Winnie nodded sagely. "And you prefer the company of dead authors to living débutantes. When the débutantes speak of nothing but the weather and their accomplishments on the pianoforte, yes." Winnie's eye sparkled with mischief. "Perhaps you might find more stimulating conversation if you asked questions worthy of thoughtful answers." Before Langdon could respond, the library door swung open. Lady Harrington's imposing figure filled the entrance, her face brightening at the sight of him. "Your Grace! I've been searching everywhere for you. Miss Pemberton has just arrived, and she plays the harp most divinely." Langdon straightened, his face smoothing into the impassive mask he wore so well in society. "How fortunate! I shall return directly." As Lady Harrington retreated, he turned back to offer Miss Oakley a proper farewell, but she had disappeared, leaving nothing but the faint scent of lavender and a book slightly askew on a nearby table. Curious, he approached the volume, a collection of sonnets, and found within its pages a slip of paper. Upon it, in an elegant hand, was written, "For those seeking refuge from tedious conversation, Shakespeare understood that the course of true love never did run smooth, but perhaps the true course of love requires more than superficial waters to navigate. W.O." Langdon found himself smiling as he tucked the note into his waistcoat pocket. "You did what?" Lady Olivia Oakley gasped, her teacup clattering against its saucer. Winnie sank deeper into her chair in the morning room of their London townhouse. "It was merely a literary observation, Mother. You left an unsigned note for the Duke of Thornfield, one of the most eligible bachelors in England, suggesting he requires depth in his romantic pursuits." Lady Oakley pressed a hand to her forehead. "It borders on impertinence." "It was signed with my initials," Winnie countered. "And it was hardly a declaration of affection." "It was forward enough," her mother insisted. "What possessed you?" Winnie considered the question. In truth, she wasn't entirely certain what had prompted her to leave the note. The Duke had seemed so different from the aloof, arrogant aristocrat society painted him to be. In his eyes, she'd glimpsed intelligence and perhaps a touch of melancholy that resonated with her own feelings of being misunderstood. "He appeared in need of a friend," she said finally. Lady Oakley sighed. "Dukes do not need friends, Winifred. Particularly not friends who are the daughters of country gentlemen with modest fortunes." Winnie winced. Her father's estate in Derbyshire provided comfortably for them, but it was nothing compared to the vast wealth of a man like the Duke of Thornfield. Besides, her mother continued, "Your season has been promising thus far. Mr. Ellsworth has shown particular attention, and Lord Billings has called twice this week." "Mr. Ellsworth speaks only of his horses, and Lord Billings is 40 years my senior," Winnie protested. "They are respectable matches," Lady Oakley insisted. "Now, promise me you will put this library incident behind you and focus on suitable prospects." Winnie nodded dutifully, though her thoughts strayed to the Duke's unexpected smile when she'd challenged him. It had transformed his severe features, revealing a warmth she suspected few were privileged to witness. "I promise to be the very model of propriety," she said, crossing her fingers beneath her shawl. 3 days later, Langdon found himself at the Royal Institution Lecture Hall, attending a discourse on recent astronomical discoveries. His presence at such an event raised eyebrows among the Dukes were not expected to concern themselves with scientific pursuits when there were estates to manage and marriages to arrange. But Langdon had always harbored an interest in the stars, a secret passion his father had dismissed as frivolous. Now, master of his own destiny, he indulged his curiosities without apology. He was surprised, therefore, to spot a familiar figure several rows ahead, her attention rapt as the lecturer described the patterns of celestial bodies. Miss Oakley sat beside an older gentleman, occasionally leaning to whisper something that made her companion smile. When the lecture concluded, Langdon maneuvered through the departing crowd until he stood before them. "Miss Oakley, what an unexpected pleasure." Winnie looked up, startled. "Your Grace! I had no idea you harbored an interest in astronomy." "Nor I you," he replied. "Though perhaps I should have guessed. You strike me as someone who enjoys looking beyond the obvious." A becoming blush colored her cheeks. "May I present my father, Mr. Richard Oakley?" The older gentleman offered a bow. "An honor, Your Grace." "The honor is mine, sir." Langdon inclined his head. "Your daughter provided me with most enlightening reading recommendations at Lady Harrington's soiree." Winnie's eyes widened fractionally, but she maintained her composure. "Did you find them helpful, Your Grace?" "Immensely," Langdon replied, patting his pocket where he still carried her note. "In fact, I wonder if I might call upon you both tomorrow? I have a volume on celestial navigation that Mr. Oakley might find interesting." Mr. Oakley beamed. "We would be delighted, wouldn't we, Winnie?" "Yes, of course," she managed, though her expression suggested she was calculating the consequences of such a visit. As they parted ways, Langdon caught the whispers that followed in his wake. By morning, speculation about his interest in the Oakley family would circulate through every drawing room in Mayfair. He found he didn't mind in the slightest. He's coming here. Lady Oakley paced the drawing room, periodically stopping to adjust a cushion or straighten a vase. "The Duke of Thornfield is calling on us. Today." "Yes, Mother," Winnie replied, attempting to focus on her book despite her mother's agitation. "To lend Father a book on navigation." Lady Oakley shot her a skeptical look. Dukes do not personally deliver books to country gentlemen without ulterior motives. Perhaps he genuinely enjoys Father's company. Or perhaps he enjoys the company of Father's daughter, Lady Oakley countered. "Did you speak with him at the lecture?" "Briefly," Winnie admitted. "He seemed genuinely interested in the subject." Her mother collapsed onto the sofa. "Winifred, I implore you, do not develop a tendre for this man. The disappointment would be unbearable." Winnie set aside her book, moved by her mother's genuine concern. "I harbor no illusions, Mother. The Duke of Thornfield moves in circles far above ours. I'm sure his interest is merely intellectual curiosity." Even as she spoke the words, Winnie felt a pang of something like regret. In their brief encounters, she had glimpsed in Lord Ravenscroft a kindred spirit, someone who valued substance over appearance, thought over platitudes. It was rare enough in society, rarer still in a man of his station. The arrival of their distinguished visitor interrupted her reflections. As the butler announced the Duke of Thornfield, Winnie straightened her simple muslin gown and took a steadying breath. Langdon entered the room with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention, yet there was none of the condescension she had observed in other aristocratic callers. He greeted her parents with genuine warmth before turning to her. "Miss Oakley," he said, his voice softer than when addressing her parents. "I trust you are well." "Exceedingly so, Your Grace." "And yourself?" "Much improved for the stimulating conversation at yesterday's lecture. I confess I had nearly forgotten such intellectual pleasures existed in London." Mr. Oakley clapped his hands together. You mentioned a book on navigation, Your Grace. Indeed. Langdon produced an elegantly bound volume from his coat. A recent publication from a retired naval captain. His methods for calculating position using the stars are revolutionary. As the men fell into animated discussion, Winnie caught the Duke's eyes occasionally straying to her, a question in them she couldn't decipher. Tea was served, and conversation flowed with surprising ease. Langdon asked thoughtful questions about their life in Derbyshire, listened attentively to her father's opinions on agricultural improvements, and even drew Winnie's reluctant mother into a discussion of the latest theatrical performances. As the visit stretched beyond the customary quarter hour, Lady Oakley's rigid posture gradually relaxed. When Winnie mentioned her favourite walking paths in Hyde Park, Langdon seized the opportunity. "Miss Oakley, would you permit me to accompany you on such a walk tomorrow morning? The weather promises to be fair." A charged silence fell over the room. Such a request, while not improper with a chaperone, signalled a level of interest that could not be mistaken. That would be lovely," Winnie replied, conscious of her mother's wide-eyed stare. "Excellent. Shall we say 10 o'clock? With your mother's permission, of course," he added, turning to Lady Oakley with perfect deference. "Certainly, Your Grace," her mother managed, seemingly robbed of her usual verbosity. As the Duke took his leave, he paused at the doorway. "Miss Oakley, I nearly forgot. I've brought something else you might enjoy." He extended a small package wrapped in brown paper. Another perspective on navigating life's more challenging waters. The moment the front door closed behind him, Lady Oakley collapsed into her chair. "Did that truly happen? Did the Duke of Thornfield just arrange to walk out with you in full view of society?" "I believe he did," Winnie murmured, her attention fixed on the package in her hands. Carefully unwrapping it, she revealed a slim volume of essays by Mary Wollstonecraft. Between its pages lay another note in the Duke's bold handwriting: "Some find refuge in libraries, others in radical ideas. I suspect you appreciate both. Your note gave me courage to seek more meaningful conversation. Tomorrow, perhaps you'll tell me what other wisdom you've discovered among the shelves?" L.R. Winnie pressed the note to her chest, her heart racing with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. The following weeks transformed Winnie's quiet London season into a whirlwind of speculation and gossip. The Duke of Thornfield's marked attention, walks in the park, appearances at the same soirees, once even a visit to an exhibition of botanical paintings, set tongues wagging throughout the ton. "They say he's merely amusing himself," Lady Pemberton whispered loudly enough for Winnie to overhear at Lady Granville's musical evening. "The Oakleys are respectable enough, but hardly fitting for a ducal connection." "Perhaps it's a wager," her companion suggested. Lord Cavendish supposedly bet £500 that Thornfield wouldn't announce an engagement this season. Winnie maintained her composure, though each barbed comment stung. She had grown increasingly fond of Langdon's company, his dry wit, his unexpected passion for astronomy and poetry, the way he listened as though her opinions mattered. But she wasn't naive. The gulf between their stations yawned wide, and she steeled herself against inevitable disappointment. Their conversations, however, suggested a deepening connection that defied society's expectations. They exchanged notes hidden in borrowed books, discussing everything from political reform to the merits of Gothic novels. During their chaperoned outings, they discovered shared views on education, a mutual dislike of fox hunting, and a common appreciation for Mozart. On a rainy afternoon at the British Museum, as they stood before a display of Greek antiquities with Lady Oakley dozing on a nearby bench, Langdon confided, "My father would have considered this a waste of ducal time. Ancient pots won't manage estates or sire heirs," he would say. "He sounds formidable," Winnie observed. "He was." Langdon's expression darkened. The late Duke believed in duty above all else. Happiness, personal fulfillment, these were luxuries a Ravenscroft could ill afford. "And you?" Winnie asked softly. "What do you believe?" His eyes met hers, intense and searching. "I'm beginning to believe that duty without joy is merely existence, not living. And that perhaps the greatest duty to one's legacy is to ensure it continues with purpose and passion rather than cold obligation." The implications of his words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Before Winnie could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Lord and Lady Bellingham, who expressed exaggerated surprise at encountering the Duke in such scholarly pursuits. The moment shattered, and with it, Winnie's brief hope that perhaps, against all odds, Langdon might be considering a future that included her. Later that week, an invitation arrived at the Oakley residence for the Ravenscroft Summer Ball, the most prestigious social event of the season, held at Thornfield House. The envelope contained a personal note from the Duke himself, requesting Winnie save him the first waltz. Lady Oakley was beside herself with excitement. "Do you understand what this means, Winifred? To be singled out at his own ball." "It means he enjoys my conversation, mother," Winnie replied, though her heart fluttered traitorously. Her mother clasped her hands. "It could mean so much more. But we must be prepared for either outcome. I've written to your Aunt Margaret, her modiste in Bond Street can create a gown worthy of such an occasion." As preparations for the ball consumed the household, Winnie found herself torn between mounting hope and practical caution. Their conversations, their shared interests, the warmth in Langdon's eyes when he looked at her, all suggested genuine affection. Yet she couldn't dismiss the whispers that followed them through society, the raised eyebrows, the speculation about his true intentions. The night before the ball, she sat at her writing desk, penning a letter to her childhood friend in Derbyshire. "I find myself in the most precarious position, dear Jane," she wrote. "To care deeply for someone whose world exists so far from my own. Society dictates that I should be grateful for any attention from a man of his station, yet my heart demands equality in affection. Is it foolish to hope that genuine connection might bridge the chasm of rank and fortune?" She sealed the letter but did not send it, tucking it instead into her journal, a private confession of feelings she dared not speak aloud. Thornfield House blazed with light, its grand facade illuminated by hundreds of lanterns that cast a golden glow across the carriages lining the circular drive. Inside, the ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors, reflecting the elite of London society in their finest attire. Langdon stood at the entrance, greeting guests with practiced courtesy while his eyes repeatedly drifted to the doorway, watching for one particular arrival. His aunt, the formidable Dowager Duchess of Thornfield, noticed his distraction. "Your attention wanders, nephew. One might think you await someone special." "The host must ensure all guests are properly welcomed," he replied smoothly. "Indeed." She tapped her fan against her palm. "Speaking of guests, I understand the Oakleys will be in attendance. The father is a gentleman of modest means, I'm told. The mother ambitious. And the daughter?" "Miss Oakley is a young woman of exceptional intelligence and character," Langdon said, his tone brooking no criticism. The dowager's eyebrows rose. "So I've heard. Quite the bluestocking, by all accounts. Unconventional tastes in literature and unseemly interests in scientific matters. Qualities I find admirable," he countered. "Admirable in a friend, perhaps. In a duchess?" She left the sentence unfinished, her meaning clear. Before Langdon could respond, the butler announced, "Mr. and Mrs. Richard Oakley and Miss Winifred Oakley." The family entered, and Langdon momentarily forgot his aunt, his guests, and the weight of his title. Winnie stood before him in a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her fair complexion and brought out the golden flecks in her hazel eyes. Her hair was arranged with simple elegance, adorned with a single pearl comb. She was not the most conventionally beautiful woman in the room. That distinction might go to Lady Caroline Winters with her perfect features and golden curls, or perhaps the statuesque Miss Eleanor Roseberry. But to Langdon, Winnie shone with a genuine warmth and intelligence that outmatched any practiced charm. He stepped forward. "Mr. Oakley, Mrs. Oakley, Miss Oakley. You honor my home with your presence." As he bowed over Winnie's gloved hand, their eyes met, and he saw in hers the same anticipation that coursed through him. "Your Grace," she murmured, "your home is magnificent." "It awaits your verdict on its library," he replied softly. "Perhaps later this evening you might permit me to show you." A blush colored her cheeks. "I should like that very much." As the Oakleys moved into the ballroom, the Dowager Duchess appeared at Langdon's side. "She seems a pleasant enough girl." Hardly remarkable, however. There are many kinds of remarkability, Aunt Gertrude, Langdon replied, watching as Winnie was immediately approached by Lord Billings for a dance. Some shine like polished silver, obvious to all. Others reveal themselves slowly, like the night sky, depth and brilliance visible only to those who truly look. The dowager studied him with sharp eyes. You speak with a poet's tongue tonight, nephew. I wonder what has inspired such eloquence. The orchestra struck up the opening notes of the first waltz, and Langdon excused himself. Making his way through the crowd, he claimed Winnie's hand, leading her to the center of the ballroom as curious eyes followed their progress. As they took their positions, he whispered, "Every person in this room is watching us." "Does that concern you?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "On the contrary," he replied, his hand settling at her waist, "I find I rather enjoy having all of society witness my preference." They moved together with surprising harmony, as though they had danced 100 waltzes before this one. Langdon guided her through the steps with confident grace, and Winnie followed intuitively, their bodies communicating in a language more eloquent than words. "You dance beautifully," he observed. "You seem surprised," she teased. "Did you expect me to trample your toes while discussing Euclidean geometry?" He laughed, the sound drawing startled glances from nearby couples. "I expected perfection, Miss Oakley, and you have delivered it." As the waltz ended, he reluctantly released her, aware that propriety demanded he dance with other guests. "Save another dance for me," he requested. "The supper dance, perhaps?" "With pleasure," she replied, already being approached by Mr. Ellsworth for the next set. Throughout the evening, Langdon fulfilled his duties as host, dancing with appropriate partners and engaging in polite conversation. Yet his attention repeatedly returned to Winnie, her animated expressions as she conversed with an elderly professor of botany, her gracious smile when partnered with his cousin Lord Edward, her quiet dignity when certain ladies of the ton deliberately turned their backs as she passed. During the supper dance, he claimed her once more, drawing her closer than strict propriety might allow. "You promised to show me the library," she reminded him as they promenaded down the set. "And I am a man of my word." "After supper, perhaps?" "I'll arrange for your mother to accompany us, of course." The dance brought them together again, hands joining briefly. "I've left something for you there," he admitted. "A presumptuous gesture, perhaps, but one I hope will please you." Curiosity brightened her eyes. "Now I shall be entirely distracted through supper, wondering what it could be." "Good," he murmured as they parted in the figures of the dance. "For I have been distracted by thoughts of you for weeks." The bold statement brought a flush to her cheeks and a sparkle to her eyes that sustained him through the remainder of the evening's formalities. After supper, with Lady Oakley trailing discreetly behind, Langdon led Winnie through the grand corridors of Thornfield House to its magnificent library. 2 stories of shelves lined the walls, accessible by a wrought-iron spiral staircase and rolling ladders. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, while comfortable leather chairs and reading tables created intimate spaces throughout the room. Winnie's intake of breath was audible. "It's the most wonderful room I've ever seen." "It was neglected for years," Langdon admitted. "My father had little use for books beyond agricultural treatises and hunting manuals. I've spent the past 3 years restoring it." Lady Oakley, seeming to understand the moment's significance, retreated to a chair near the door, picking up a ladies' magazine with exaggerated interest. Langdon led Winnie deeper into the library, toward a small alcove where moonlight spilled through a bay window, illuminating a reading nook with cushioned window seats. "This is my favorite spot," he confessed. "From here, on clear nights, you can see Cassiopeia. The Queen consigned to the heavens," Winnie smiled. "Punished for her vanity, yet immortalized among the stars." "A complex fate," Langdon agreed, stepping closer. "Winnie, Miss Oakley, I have something for you." From a nearby shelf, he retrieved a package wrapped in midnight blue velvet. "The first edition is there, behind the astronomy texts," he explained. "This is something else." Puzzled, Winnie unwrapped the velvet to reveal a leather-bound journal. Opening it, she found blank pages except for an inscription on the first leaf, "For Winifred, whose wisdom I first discovered in a secret note." May this volume record the beginning of our greatest story. With deepest affection, Langdon. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the words. It's beautiful, she whispered. There's more, he said gently, turning to the shelf behind them and removing a small, leather-bound volume. The book where I found your note at Lady Harrington's. I've kept it close ever since that night. He opened it to where a silk ribbon marked a page, revealing not just Winnie's original note but dozens of others, a collection of their literary exchanges over the weeks of their acquaintance. I've saved every word, he said, his voice low and earnest. They've become more precious to me than any treasure in this house. Winnie looked up at him, hope and uncertainty warring in her expression. Langdon, she said, using his given name for the first time, what are we doing? Society will never approve a match between us. Your aunt made that abundantly clear tonight. My aunt, he replied with a wry smile, also disapproves of my interest in astronomy, my preference for Mozart over Handel, and my habit of reading at breakfast. Her disapproval is practically an endorsement. When Winnie didn't smile in return, he grew serious. I know the whispers that have followed us. I've heard the speculation about my motives. But surely you know me well enough now to understand that I am not a man who bows to society's expectations. But you are a duke, she insisted. You have responsibilities, a legacy built by men who married for advantage and lived without love, he interrupted. I've watched my peers enter loveless marriages for the sake of connections or fortune. I've seen the hollow existence that results. I want more, Winnie. I want a partner who challenges my mind as well as captures my heart. He took her hands in his. That first night in Lady Harrington's library, you asked if we were to be friends. I now find friendship wholly insufficient for what I feel for you. Winnie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Are you certain? The tongue will talk. Let them, he said fiercely. What use is rank and fortune if it cannot secure my happiness? And you, Winifred Oakley, make me happier than I ever thought possible. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. This belonged to my grandmother, a woman of remarkable intelligence who married my grandfather despite her modest origins as a clergyman's daughter. He once told me it was the wisest decision of his life. Opening the box revealed a sapphire ring surrounded by small diamonds. Will you make me the happiest of men? Will you be my duchess, my partner, my greatest love? For a moment, Winnie stared at the ring, then at his face, searching for any hint of doubt. Finding none, her expression blossomed into a radiant smile. Yes, she said simply. With all my heart, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Lady Oakley let out a muffled sob from her position by the door, abandoning any pretense of not listening. Langdon raised Winnie's hand to his lips. I believe we've made your mother happy. And me, Winnie whispered. Incandescently so. Then perhaps, he murmured, drawing her closer, you might permit me a small impropriety to seal our engagement. Her answer was to rise on her toes, meeting his lips with her own in a kiss that promised a lifetime of intellectual passion and heartfelt devotion, a true meeting of minds and souls that began with a secret note in a library and blossomed into the greatest love either could have imagined.